say it. Are we live?
You are live.
Well, can we start out with this?
Yeah.
So let's call this first meeting of the Landmarks and Historic Preservation Commission to start, and we call the roll. Carrie, please.
Sure. Commissioner Brady? Here. Commissioner Buzowski?
Here.
Commissioner Edmondson? Here. Commissioner Planell?
Here.
Commissioner Reese?
Here.
Commissioner Munster?
Yep.
You have the floor.
Doesn't look like we have any petitioners, is there, unless there's anybody online, can they do that?
No.
Any correspondence?
No. That's good. It's our first meeting.
Good to know we're here. We haven't upset anybody
Only
yet.
right.
Well, I thought that we should begin, since we haven't had an official meeting, to very briefly people introduce themselves in case, or does everybody know each other? We don't really need to do that. And Mark's not here, he usually makes introductory remarks. Steve, you want to make any introductory remarks?
I mean, yeah, pretty good.
So everybody's, we're all set with that, just move on, I think, to the business?
I know, so I missed our last meeting, so I'd love to
Okay.
meet folks.
It was not really a meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's
It's
just
not
not,
We couldn't really discuss
we didn't have quorum.
And we didn't really adjourn,
So we didn't really meet.
because we really didn't meet,
Right.
but we got a lot of not really information.
And I wasn't here either,
So
so.
yeah, I'd love to
Neither.
get to know.
Will you start?
Oh,
Don't.
So
What
you
do you
guys
want-
are all in charge.
Oh, just, people just talk for a couple minutes on their background and.
okay. So I'm Sarah Edmondson. I live here in Center City. I went to Harvard College, and I lived in the Cooperstown area for several years. So Oneonta's kind of always been my hub. I've always been coming to Oneonta. And I've lived here in the city since 2020. I come from a museum background, so I'm a public historian, and I'm finishing up my PhD in history at UAlbany. What I'm particularly interested in is the relationship between academic histories and how they're communicated to the rest of the world, to people who are not historians. So my dissertation looks at museums and how they've been created architecturally through historic preservation efforts, materially through the items that museum curators have chosen to put in those sites, and then just like culturally. So I study food. But what I'm really interested in with this commission is essentially because it is an act of public history, because we are engaging with the historic built environment, and that's what I'm really interested in. And I think there's just a lot of opportunities to really share the incredible architectural history that Oneonta has with the community, who may not even realize what treasures we have around us. That's me.
And Dara and Jerry and I were at the last meeting, and then we spent a fair amount of time learning about each other. And I think I know Bill and Helen and Sarah well enough, so I probably don't have to do introductions, so I'll pass.
You'd like me to go next?
Yeah.
I'm Helen Reese, and I was born in Cooperstown, grew up in Worcester, lived in Oneonta all of my adult life, went away for college. But I'm Otsego County, and I have been involved in business. We had a downtown store. I have been involved in education. I was a librarian for 32 years. And I'm currently involved with the Fort Wilcox House, which is, not that I came with a paid political advertisement, but we were giving a CCAL class this afternoon, and I haven't gone home to change. So, and the Fort Wilcox House is the oldest house in the city of Oneonta, and it was our effort as 4 elementary school teachers to turn the oldest house in the city of Oneonta, which was a derelict disgrace, but had been the focal point of the 1976 bicentennial. And that's when the city bought it for the bicentennial, and then nothing happened to it. So in 1988, the 4 of us went over and approached Mayor Brenner and said, we would like to turn this into the focal point for the local history curriculum for the 4th grades, because we all teach 4th grade, and we'd like to have something to show them. And the city council and the mayor were wonderful. They said, you can do anything you want with that house, as long as it doesn't cost the city any money. Anybody heard that before? At which point, we have been true to our word. We got a $100,000 grant to stabilize it from the state. And then we've had basically private funds that have restored it and turned it into what is now a community museum. It's a New York State Chartered House Museum. It's on the Historic Register. And everything in the house has been given to us by somebody in the community. So it represents not only the history of the house and the people that lived in the house, but the people that lived in Oneonta. And this was my grandfather's rocker, and this is my grandmother's bowl. And so it has a lot of Oneonta history as well as the history of the Swart Wilcox families. And now we are in the process of applying for a barn because we have run out of room, and as a museum, we are not adequately providing for the collection. It's in the attic, it's in the second floor, and in the winter, it's cold, and in the summer, it's hot, and none of that is good for collections, fabric, paper, photos. And so we would like to have the barn work as both a community center with a large meeting room and also as a climate-controlled storage area. So that is our goal, that is our hope for, and we're working on it. And that's where we are now, batting our head against a wall.
Do you have architectural plans for it?
We have a floor plan done by a structural engineer, but I was glad to know you're an architect because I couldn't introduce
I did
myself
two
soon.
museums in Baltimore, the Baltimore Museum of Art and the Maryland Historical Society, so we
Love
put
to,
additions on.
love to talk with you
Sure.
more.
Absolutely. I'm Dara Brady. I'm a relative newcomer to Oneonta, although we've been around Oneonta since '81 because we bought a falling down barn and 30 acres in Walton and slowly turned that into a 3-season house over the last 40-some years. We initially lived in New York City, so it was an easy drive up to Walton. And my English teacher lives right down the road from my high school. She's still right down the road, still alive. But Oneonta was where we came for Home Depot and lunch at the Oil Cafe and that kind of thing, our big town. And so when we were looking to change how we were living, because we were a huge, big old 6-bedroom Victorian house in a really gorgeous historic neighborhood in Baltimore that had been laid out by Frederick Law Olmsted right before he went completely around the bend in 1892. And I talked my husband into thinking about Oneonta, so we scoped Zillow for 3 years until we found the property on Woodside, which we really went more for the site than for the architecture, because there's nothing you can do about a bad site, but a lot you can do about the architecture. We've since put an addition on the back, a big addition, and just a big one room with a wood stove and a big deck, and then a porch on the front. And now, $6,000 worth of deer fence, but that's not because we're big gardeners. So we've been here since June of 2020. Moved right in the heart of the pandemic, and we love it here. It's great, love it. So I sent my resume to Bob because I got a lot of experience both with museums and with theaters and with historic architecture, mostly because of the article in the paper about the Oneonta Theater. And I guess you maybe passed it on to the mayor who finally thought maybe I should be on this commission or something. So that's how I got here.
Jerry Webster, I don't know frescoes, been here since 1977. Got a BA in history at SUCO, and been studying history ever since. That's my story.
Sticking to it.
Best Pete's in town, right, Jerry?
What's
You
that?
left the best Pete's in town on
Of
your
course.
resume.
I'll second that.
Thank you. How you doing?
My name's Bill Plymell. First thing I'd like to say is thank you to Helen for all your hard work in the 80s. My kids love that place, so they go to Riverside.
I was gonna say, did they go through Riverside? Jerry's did too.
Yeah, best school in the system.
Yep. I've been in Oneonta since 2010, so I'm still a relative newcomer, I think. Born and raised in Cherry Valley, so I also am from Otsego County. I have a degree in historic preservation and restoration technology is actually the title of it. and I just here to do some good for the community. So that's that.
Thanks, everybody. I suppose our first order of business is to elect a chair and a vice chair. And then I hope the rest of the agenda, Steve, you can tell us if we're going, if this is a good order or if there's some order makes more sense.
Got it. I see the agenda.
So, who's interested in the
This would be the point where anyone who wanted to
Take
be
a
the,
nomination?
yeah, to make
Yeah.
nominations.
I
and-
nominate Bob.
I
I
second
should
it.
nominate.
Yeah, I did, I certainly wasn't campaigning for it, trying to get this together, but as Sarah was saying before, I've been trying to get this certified local government thing for a dozen years anyway. And, so it's finally coming, I'm very happy about, you know, to congratulate Steve on all the work he did to make it happen. Because I couldn't make it happen when I was on council.
You should be really annoying. You gotta be more annoying, Bob.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to all vote? Yeah.
You would, yeah, you take a vote.
Okay, so,
All in favor?
All in favor?
yes.
Yeah.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Congratulations.
Now I have a vice chair.
And the vice chair?
I nominate Sarah.
So, if there's anyone else who wants to do it, speak up. So I'm not opposed to it, but depending on how much time you would need from it, I'm at like a critical spot in my dissertation where I don't have a ton of time, and I'm doing a lot of traveling for like the next 6 to 8 months. So that just,
Well, let's ask Steve, does the CLG program spell out what the chair and vice chair
So-
are
so the
responsible
vice
for,
chair
more
is-
than what we would normally think?
Yeah, I mean, the vice chair is just here basically in the absence of the chair. So like if you weren't here, you need someone to kind of run the meetings, make the agendas, like do the like the chair stuff. So yeah, it's basically just like because otherwise if you weren't to make a meeting, then there would be kind of yeah. So it's
And
just
Sarah couldn't make it, could I appoint somebody to be to the temporary chair of that? And I couldn't make it for that meeting?
You could just, you know, I can't be here, Bill, you're running the meeting. You could-
As long as we have one.
As long as you have more.
Any other nominations? Hearing none? All in favor of Sarah for vice chair?
I'll take a second first.
Okay.
I'll
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping us anyway.
Robert's Rules of Orders, yes.
And opposed? Okay, Sarah, congratulations, thank you. So it seems like is our first order of business trying to be certified by National Park Service?
Yeah, so now that you've had your first meeting, part of getting that certification is we had to have a board. You had to actually be doing the things the board's supposed to do. So ideally what we'll talk about next will kind of be that. We had to have a resume from everyone involved, which you kind of have done. Why are you giving me a funny
We
look?
don't have to have a written resume?
Well, so what we have to do is we have to send in writing to SHPO why the people on the board were picked, what their qualifications are, how they were nominated, why they were nominated, like just basically you have to justify why the people that are on the board are on the board. And that's most of what it is. So once you start actually doing the processes, like so the next thing we're gonna talk about is like the designation process. That's where we would then submit to them, like this is how they wanna see that you're actually doing business.
So you'll keep after us about what needs to
Yep.
happen to get this packet together, which
Yep.
you'll shepherd through.
Yeah, so what's gonna happen is I'm gonna contact SHPO tomorrow and be like, we had our first meeting, what paperwork do you need from me so that we can start kind of collecting all that? Because they're gonna want a specific, like, I don't wanna say it's specific, but like, they're gonna want, like, what I wanna submit to them is something that they recognize, not something that I've concocted. So I'm gonna ask them to say like, how are these resumes formatted? What do you wanna see, so that I'm not sending them stuff and they're sending it back saying, oh, well, we wanna see it like this, or it should be 1-inch margins, not half-inch.
Do you want the resumes from us, or do you want to be doing them?
What I'm gonna do tomorrow when I ask SHPO is I'm gonna say, what format do you wanna see for that? So that I
Maybe
can
get
then,
back to us.
Yep.
About,
Yeah, no, so, when you talk to them, can you just double check to find out if they want resumes or if they would accept CVs? Because I know that like my resume and my CV are like two totally
Yeah.
different documents, so like that would be important for me to know.
yeah, that's what I'm gonna ask them.
Okay.
What format, what do you wanna see from each commissioner? What do you wanna see specifically from the mayor, because the mayor has to write, because he's the one that nominated / appointed everyone. What do I need from the mayor to justify those appointments? So I'm gonna get with them tomorrow now that we've actually had a meeting, because before what was holding us up is we didn't actually have a commission and we weren't actually doing business. So they were like, you have a hypothetical, you don't have an actual.
now, there is a one-page form in which we need to fill out to certify or prove that we meet the qualifications.
Yep.
Should we each draft that form and get it to you to see if you think it passes muster before? And then-
Well,
Well, you're gonna get it anyway, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do tomorrow. I'm gonna sit down with SHPO and say, what exactly, put it in a,
But that's different from the resume, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's two different things.
Yep. I just wanna be able to send you guys like a packet, basically, like, this is the process, this is what you need to fill out, this is what you need to sign, this is what, so that way I can send it to you and the mayor. I'll have a copy, we can all kind of see what we need to do and kind of collaborate on what that timeline looks like.
So it's your understanding that we can move ahead now with
Yep.
delimiting the.
Yeah, so now that you're having meetings, you can actually start conducting business.
Great.
And that's what SHPO, and that's what National Park Service wants to see, that you're actually a functioning commission, not just on paper, we have this ordinance, but it's not actually doing anything.
Interesting.
Cause that was the holdup before. Was the ordinance meets their requirements and standards, but we weren't actually conducting business, nor did we have a commission.
Okay. Any questions for Steve at this point? Hearing none, so the proposal is, goes to the common council for us to define what areas, what sites should be covered by the Certified Local Government Program and this commission. And the three of us at the last meeting talked about.
The last non-meeting.
At the last, yes, thank you, at the gathering that we had, that it could be everything on the National Register, all the properties on the National Register. Or it could be all the properties on the National Register and ones that are covered by Jesse Ravage's.
So you have two things going on right now in Oneonta. You have the National Register sites that we've already been nominated and put on the National Register. So those have already been surveyed, they've already gone through SHPO, they've already gone through National Park Service. They already are designated on the National Register. So like Stuart Wilcox House is on it, downtown Oneonta, Walnut, a couple individual listings, but mostly Main Street, Walnut Street. Those are your two actual districts. So one of the options or one of the thought processes is this ordinance works only on local historic districts. So National Park Service has its process, which is its own separate thing. And then this ordinance is a local ordinance that has its own separate thing. So the National Register doesn't actually protect anything unless it's being using federal money. So if you want to like blast an interstate through Walnut Street, National Park Service jumps in and says if it's being funded, if it's being approved at the federal level, if it's being funded or approved at a state level, it has to go through additional review. If I just decide that I want to tear down like 8 houses on Walnut Street and build whatever, there's nothing to stop me from doing it as long as there's no funding from a state or national, federal level process. As long as they're not reviewing, funding, approving, they don't care. So this local ordinance essentially is adding kind of teeth to these historic properties. So the only way to apply this local ordinance is to places that have been delineated as locally historic districts. So the easiest way to do that, because if you make a local historic district, you have to essentially have a purpose for it. It can't just be an arbitrary process where you're like, this house, this one, but not this one. It's like any other zoning or planning process. You have to have a rational reason and purpose and kind of legislative.
But there could be non-comporting properties within the districts.
There could be non-conforming properties in the districts, and you have that with national districts all the time. You know, if you look down, like on Main Street, you know, you've got structures that don't conform to the district, but are kind of in that. And as we get like further and further in time, I mean, now we have structures that are eligible to be put into districts because, you know, 1955 is now ancient history.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I always joke around, there's an old Arby's sign where I'm from that now could be on the National Register. That like Arby's restaurant sign is. So like what you get into is the easiest way to make local districts is to say these places that have already been surveyed, the ones that are on the National Register, make a lot of sense because the survey work's done. It's easy to justify why we would say those should be local historic districts because they've already been designated as national historic districts.
So we can't say that any building that's built before 1900 or something like that can, in addition to the things on the district?
So that's where I was kind of headed to next. The city of Oneonta, in partnership with Otsego 2000, did a large survey that we're completing that covers the entire city. And it has properties and districts kind of roughly surveyed out. It is not a complete National Register application. It's just a lot of survey work from one. That national historic district process will take probably years. Like we're still probably years away from getting anywhere on that. However, you could use some of that survey work to justify adding properties that are otherwise not listed nationally. So you could say based off this very complete survey we have, I mean, we made GIS mapping for it, we did pictures, written, you know, drive-by evaluations, historical stuff. I mean, it's a big document. So you could say, based on this survey work, this is why we picked maybe boundaries that are slightly different than what the National Registers are. So yeah, so you could change those delineations a little bit.
Is that GIS mapping online now, or?
We have it. So I can send that to you guys. The city has it, yeah. We have the document. I just have to verify with the person that completed the whole thing that we can actually start distributing it.
Is there a process by which we would make these National Register districts a locally landmarked district?
That's what, so the process that we would be talking about is, so tonight, we would have to draft up a packet, and by we, I mean probably the city, or you guys would draft up an application or draft up a proposal to the council saying that these districts should be local districts. The only reason that I throw out the national district thing is they've already been designated. So we've already said these are so important, they're nationally important. So,
But the whole point of this ordinance is to give us teeth to protect those properties within that.
Yep.
So
what I'm saying is like your easiest first move is to say these ones that are nationally important are obviously locally important. So it makes a lot of sense to just say the Walnut District and your Main Street District right out of the gate, they're kind of no-brainers because if they're important on a federal level, then they would be important on.
and then is there a timing issue where it would make sense to look at what you've already surveyed and make sure we're not, you know, cutting off our nose? That we might want to wait to get, I guess you said it would take years to get the other survey properties onto the National Register.
Right.
But does it make sense to use the survey work you've done to add
That's,
significant historic properties
so
to
that-
these,
yep.
and then say this is the local district.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, you could use the additional survey work we've done to build a bigger district than what we have already nationally registered.
There are certain areas that are specifically local. I'm thinking of the one down on the Sixth Ward, that the railroad moved the houses. It
Yep.
makes it a very unique area, something like
Yep.
that, what you're talking about for a local designation?
So anything that we would wanna impact with this ordinance is gonna be a local. So anything you propose to the council to be a local district is going to be impacted by this ordinance. So you could theoretically designate anything as a local district, and you could use the survey work we've done to do that.
Excuse me, Jesse Ravitch did this, was the leader of this team that did the survey. I don't think she submitted the final copy yet, has she?
We pretty much have a pretty final, I think it's a final draft, that's what I'm saying.
Final draft.
I'm gonna ask her when we can kind of, or what she feels comfortable with distributing, but we have all the mapping done.
Otsego 2000 took the lead on this, got a grant from the Preservation League. Jesse was the person who did the downtown district for GOHS 20 years ago, and got it through State Historic Preservation Office. She has a great reputation there. It's looking really good for these properties, whatever she recommends to be on the district. It's gonna cost more money and time to get it done. So I think what you're saying is we could ask for all the properties that she is recommending in her
Yeah.
study.
So in her study, she has kind of an idea that like, she has an idea that would expand the downtown district, so she has a couple kind of, like she's district out the whole city basically, and then she has some ideas about how the existing downtown boundaries could be modified, so.
Yeah, for example, she's talking about shoulder districts on the east and the west ends of the downtown district to be added, like River Street and Manning, and I guess out by Otsego Street and that area.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is, your option is, you could just kick it off and be like, okay, these national districts, just make them local districts, we've already surveyed them, they're already delineated, they're already there, easy to do. Or you guys, I talk to Jesse, we get you the survey work that's been done, and you discuss drawing your own boundaries and coming up with kind of your own.
So the question I have, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So, I see benefits to both ideas. I guess my question is, if we start out by transitioning the national districts that we already have into local districts, is it one and done, or could we later on say, hey, we have propositions for other local districts? Because, I mean, I know I don't live in one of the recognized national historic districts, I don't have a national registered property, but I really think that my neighborhood is of historical significance, so I would love to down the road kind of see that like delineated as something local. So is it one and done, or is it a continual process?
It's continual, you can
Yeah,
always
so
add.
If we were to take the national survey and lay the foundation with that,
Yeah,
then from there, we build.
yeah.
So when we get the survey from Jesse,
Yep.
we just say, okay, well, let's put the wings on. Propose to put the wings on. And let's see where we go into inner city. Let's see where we go down River Street. Let's see where we go down Chestnut. And we start building on those districts. And then, but we have our foundation.
Yeah.
And that preserves the foundation because, like Steve said, anybody comes in and wants to put a interstate through, something like that. On the federal level, they're able to do it. Is that correct?
I mean,
Or is it the opposite?
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
So
They
then-
spent federal
but
money
then we
back
get-
into an impact, a
Yeah.
big federal impact study, which would prove that, in fact, the highway going down Walnut Street would be detrimental to
Right.
the National Register District, and that might stop the process.
But if you get a fat cat with his own private money, he could just go in there
Mhm.
and tear down
Yes.
Walnut Street and build a condo
Yeah.
and
Right.
say, one and done. But if we have that covered, they can't do that. And it kind of draws a line in the sand. It's like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. And this is how we're gonna work it.
That brings up another question. What effect does this have on the local land owner. Taking it from the National Historic to the
So the local ordinance would require exterior changes that are essentially visible from the right of way to be reviewed by this board for impact.
So if you have it as is now, it can stay that way, but anything you change
Yep.
has to be approved.
So,
Which
for-
is, when you go to do anything, you go through the code enforcement.
Right,
And-
Which
and
is what,
once we have this, if their house was in the local district, then it would be kicked out as, oh, you need to go bring your stuff to us.
Excuse me, can we talk, can we say it's this, the two districts and the other properties, it's anything on the National Register?
Yeah.
I mean, that, because that's for Wilcox House would be covered,
Yeah.
Wilbur Mansion, the Armory, the Chapin Memorial, there's a lot of properties that aren't in the
yeah,
district.
one-offs. Yeah, there's a lot of one-offs.
Just a quick question, because having been one of the founding members of our locally landmark neighborhood in Baltimore, it was a long process, and it was often quite confrontational, because people didn't want to have their rights infringed as to what could be done to their houses, and that may happen here too, and so. I mean, I think all of what you're saying about the National Register turning that into makes perfect sense. And the only thing is, do we want to sort of get as broad a sweep as possible in certain of these areas, like Walnut Street or Main Street, so that when inevitable, you know what, hits the fan, we're, I don't know, it's just so.
Oh, go ahead.
No, so, I don't think I'm gonna say the same thing. So I think that one of the great things that this local ordinance has going for it is the opportunity to educate people and to kind of change the narrative from aging housing stock to assets and historical built environment. So if people, so my house, the porch was caving in, it's a Victorian house. All of our neighbors were like, oh, just go to Home Depot, put up some pillars. And we went and we had the porch host like copied it exactly so we could restore the porch. It's not a National Register site, so we aren't getting any tax credits for it. If someone was in that scenario and they came to us, we could then educate them about the tax credits that they're eligible for and kind of like sweeten the deal a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
because most people don't know about this. So I'm hopeful that we as a board could provide resources to kind of help mitigate that like negativity.
And will those
I
benefits
totally
go
agree.
for the local as well as the national?
So there is there's a local tax, I guess kind of incentive for exterior work on properties. We couldn't bring that law in until we had this board working. So one of the requirements for that exterior tax incentive is you have to have an architectural review board that is approving or denying permit applications. So if you have local districts and you have an approving board, which is you guys, we can enact a law that provides tax relief for exterior improvements. And it's basically I think it's a 10-year. So if your house is reassessed for the improvements, like let's say you put in $20,000 of improvements on the outside of your house, your assessment doesn't go up in the first year. And then in the second year, your assessment can only go up, it's capped. And over that period of time, you basically get 10 years of assessment relief on those improvements.
So there is an incentive for.
So there's an incentive for the local districts, and then the National Register gives additional incentives at a federal level. So those are on like you get a tax credit.
Yeah, and state, yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
So
state
it's-
and federal, it's
Well,
bundled.
so like, worst case scenario, someone wants to redo something on the exterior of their house, they bring it to the board and we say, great news, you're eligible for all this like money that you didn't know about, like, that would, best case scenario. But anyway, Bob.
but that could also, I'm sorry, but that could also be, you wanna use the word educational, but you just say, okay, well, kinda like your idea, but you're not sticking to the plan of the
Yeah.
look of the house. But here, you can get a grant for this, you can get a grant for that, and here's your tax incentive to do that as well. And if you talk the talk that way,
Yeah.
then, you know, it entices them to kind of go that way instead of going, I just want these vinyl windows put in and that's that. You know, which, you know, every once in a while, vinyl window might look good.
It's on the back of the house.
Look at the house,
Is
on the
there-
shed.
Is there any way for do people who, so we had this big problem in Baltimore too, where vinyl window companies would just literally go door to door in our neighborhood, selling people on wholesale replacement of their historic wood windows with their vinyl windows. And we tried very much to get the Baltimore County zoning people to flag these things so that it just didn't start happening, because literally they could, you know, get the person to sign on the dotted line, and the next day they were there ripping the windows out, and we, those of us in the neighborhood would call, we can get a stop work order and that kind of thing, but it's, is there any way that we can educate the community of vinyl window people?
Well, I mean, so
About
that would be part of what you guys are tasked with doing,
Okay.
is coming up with ways to educate the public about historic preservation. I mean, that's the point of the board.
Certainly, one of the big things we might be able to do that would be a big carrot is help people actually apply for these tax credits, because they are onerous. I mean,
Yeah.
at least in Baltimore, they were god awful. You know, it took me 3 years to get the last one on our house.
Yeah,
In the State Historic Preservation Office, the folks there are waiting for us to expand our district. They've been lobbying me for years to, that the whole center city needs to be on the National Register, State Register. And I just didn't have the wherewithal doing the other things I was doing to take this on. But with Jesse doing it, it's very likely that it's going to happen.
I mean, in the city, like we invested in that project. I mean, we helped fund it. I mean, so we're
As did the
committed.
Chamber of Commerce did it too.
Yeah, so we're committed to that process.
So do we wanna make a motion to propose existing national, landmark districts and national register properties be, also labeled as local districts
So
and
what
landmarks?
would happen is we have to put together a packet, like an application. So you would have to, we'd have to provide public notice in the form of a public hearing to everyone who would be impacted.
Excuse me, that's, if we just did the National Register properties?
Yep.
And before we send it to council?
Yeah, so you would have to provide public notice that your commission is recommending these go to council.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, before you can essentially do anything, you have to have a proposal. It has to include why you're doing it. It has to have justification. It has to have a map. It has to have, which we already have a lot of that material. That packet, we then have to basically provide notice to anyone whose property is impacted by this, so that they can show up and say like, no way, Jose.
But for operational purposes for this commission, what step do we need to take next to begin undertaking like that work? Do we need like a motion to say this like what we're going to do, or is it just general conversation, like how does that?
You would probably need a motion to say that you were gonna prepare an application. Right
So
here.
not,
I'm reading the thing right now, but that's what it appears.
Yeah.
And do we have an application? Like, is there a physical application that?
I mean,
is
because you're the
forwarded to
commission, it would be kind of weird to like fill out an application to yourself. But what you would do is you would put together like the material.
The purposes and
Yeah.
the benefits and the.
You would provide like a written, this is why we're doing it, this is why we think these properties are, this is why.
Given that discussion and thinking about the optics of the public, my question to the board would be, does it benefit to roll out both the national and the local districts that we may come up with all at once, instead of doing the national, dealing with, contacting all of the owners and such, and then at some point down the road doing the
I
local?
think that makes sense in that, look, we've done it successfully for these, so expanding it won't be a problem for the rest, and make it a little more palatable.
And the real issue is that turning it into a local district is what actually has impact for the local landowner.
It adds
The National
stick.
Register doesn't
Yeah.
do anything, it's just, it's nice, you might get a plaque, but literally all it does is stop the federal government from spending money. It's because they did the Secretary of the Interior's and that historic preservation, and they couldn't have one arm of the federal government tearing down something that they'd spent money on protecting
It was
from another
It was a
arm.
response to urban renewal.
Yeah.
That's what the honorific title was, a response to urban renewal.
I see what you're saying though, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder if like, so the only reason I'm leaning towards doing what's already on the National Register is because it's kind of like beta testing, like how we work, and so we can really streamline the processes without it being the entire city or most of the
Yeah.
city. But I think you're right. I think it's a 6 to 1, half dozen to another, how well it works.
No, I think your point makes a lot of sense. It's just a discussion I wanted to hear everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, like Dara brought up, one of the things that we really will need to do is outreach to our council people, and outreach to our friends and neighbors and people who live in the city, because like the number of people who are highly educated, interested in historic preservation, who hear National Register, just panic. People are gonna tell me what color I can paint my house. That's not okay. Like, I think.
I just want to point out that's specifically not covered in this
Yes.
ordinance.
Well,
You
yeah.
can do any color you want.
Well, yeah, but I think that it's
Avoid
now like.
agenda, though.
It's, but that's
We're
the optics of it.
Yeah, we're officially commissioners, like, we need to be sharing that widely. I'm bummed that we missed Preservation Month, because that would have been a wonderful opportunity to really, like, roll out, like, what it is. But I think we just have to, like, go at this really strong, advocating for.
Okay, let's come up with some wording that's appropriate for getting this moving. I went through this, I couldn't find the part about how to, I've got this, downloaded the information and regulations regarding the certification process, and I might have missed it, but I don't see it in there about, it's more city, right?
So page 6 of the ordinance, it's 160 sub 11, under designation. Sub 2, after receipt of a full application or other matter referred to it, the commission shall schedule a public hearing on all proposed resource, individual, landmark, or historic district delineation. Public notice of any such hearing shall be given by publication in a newspaper of general circulation within the city of Oneonta at least 15 days prior to the public hearing date. And then notice of a proposed delineation shall be sent to the owner or owners of the property or properties proposed for designation, describing the property proposed, or, if any district, the proposed district boundary, and denouncing public hearing by the commission to consider delineation.
What does after receipt of a full application?
So,
mean?
So you'd be under other matter, because you're not receiving an application from yourself, you're taking this on as a item
Right.
for the commission.
so that's the part where like, you're not applying to yourself, but you would still have to provide a map delineating the areas, which we have in-house. You would probably want to provide like a written, you know, we believe as a commission that this is part of an important, you know, preservation of cultural, architectural, and historic, you know, resources in the city. You would want to provide like a, why are we doing this? What is the rationale of doing this?
Make a shot at a motion.
Sure.
Make a motion that we proceed with the actions necessary to fulfill the designation in Article 160-11 to, finish it.
To recognize the existing National Historic districts and individual properties as local,
Historic districts.
and properties, like, because we're doing properties and districts.
Does that sound like it would do the necessary for us to move on to the next steps?
Yeah.
Can I make the motion or not as a chair?
Of course you can.
Okay, I just made that motion. Do I hear a
Would you
second?
repeat it?
Do you want to repeat it? I didn't write it down.
You got it?
I got it. Second that motion.
So a motion by Dara, and let's,
All in favor?
no, I think we need to discuss.
Yep, discussion first. Make sure there's no additional discussion.
And maybe as soon as you get it down there, you could read it back to us.
So you're taking a motion that the commission completes the actions necessary to fulfill designation in chapter 160 sub 11 to recognize existing national historic districts and local properties as local historic districts and properties.
I guess add after, it doesn't, 6111 of the Certified Local Government Program of the City of Leontis.
Okay.
Et cetera.
And I think the only discussion that I think I wanna be sure that we add is that idea that Bill brought up, kinda like that we do plan in the future to revisit other areas of the city, this isn't all we'll do.
Right. So we've passed this, and then we have the hearing, and then it goes to the council.
Yep.
Um,
Then they hold a hearing to basically, well, they do it by
They
resolution.
do it by resolution.
Yeah. So you're basically doing all the footwork for the council. You're doing the public hearing, you're doing the actual review. You then send it to the common council and they say yay or nay.
And by the way, every single council member was in favor of the CLG, is that, I'm quite sure. So they should be on board with what's a basic level of coverage to be built.
How are the landowners gonna get notified?
Certified.
Certified,
They'll
yeah.
get certified notice, I think it says.
And would we have
Doesn't it?
more than one meeting, or more than, I mean, it seems like a lot of people to cram into this room.
Well, you'll be, I mean, some people might not show up.
Yeah.
I
A
mean,
lot of people won't show up.
We're talking about Walnut Street, basically.
Walnut
Yeah,
and
Main
Main.
So the,
And the
And
other
yeah, all the
properties.
individual properties.
are we talking about the owners of the buildings or the residents of the businesses?
The owners.
Owners.
Building owners will be notified.
But anybody can come to the hearing.
Yeah.
Which also brings me to the question about, because when Helen just worded it, the people who are renting on Main Street, how are they to comply with any changes that they would do, other than, okay, Mr. Landlord, Ms. Landlord, Mrs. Landlord, however way you wanna put it, we wanna do a different facade. Can we do this? Do the landlords then tell the renters, this is what you can or cannot do?
Before we get to any of that, outside of that original motion, can I get a vote on that?
Is it still discussion though?
That's what we're changing topics, so I
Oh,
wanna
okay,
make
okay.
sure that either we go back or we finish.
Yeah. Okay, well, Terry?
Nope, I have this, you've indicated Dara was our second, so.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the, no?
Yes, so they're gonna get a certified letter. I feel like there should be some information, either in that letter or,
Yeah, so
and or set up on the website. Is that all gonna be taken care of, or is that something that we need to develop?
So I think in the certified letter, we would include the map showing the property, and, I mean, we could send the ordinance itself is available online.
It's just, my concern is, okay, so I'm a property owner, I'm getting a letter in the mail saying, a district is gonna be set up locally.
Right.
And your
Well, what
property's
does
gonna
that
be in
mean?
it.
Right, like, what does that mean for me? And
So, I
so
mean-
I feel like there should be some information presented either in the letter and or on the city website saying, this is what it's gonna do for you, right off the bat, this is what it's gonna do for you.
Yeah, because honestly, I'd like to stay away from letters.
Yeah, sure.
They're incredibly expensive,
That's
and I know that sounds horrible. What we've transitioned to is doing a postcard mailing, which contains the information and a link to the website where everything can be. We can put the maps there, we can put a copy and a link to the ordinance, we
Yeah.
can put everything on that page.
We
And
can
do we
make
not
that-
have to have a notice of a hearing too, in various ways?
It would be a notice of public hearing, it would go out in the Daily Star as a legal notice, it'll appear on the front page under our news and announcements. And it will be noted on your next meeting's agenda, or depending on what date you select for your public hearing.
So we could have the public hearing as our meeting, for part of our meeting.
I just believe that it would behoove us as a committee to get the information as to why we're doing this out as soon as possible, so that
Can we make like a cheat sheet on the website? Can we populate? Yeah. So we could populate it with.
Do we have a website, or do
You
we
will,
just,
yes.
or we,
There was nothing to put on there yet,
oh, we do have a
but
website?
you will have one, yes.
a page on the city
On the
website.
city website, yeah, under boards and commissions.
And
I
I would
think
suggest,
I think Bill's point is so important.
Yes.
You've got to let them know how it will affect.
Otherwise,
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and we need to give them as much of the carrots. And some of those include, there've been long-term studies done by the Park Service on the benefit of local and landmark districts in preserving homeowners' value and keeping it steady over time, you know, because the
I
problem
mean, that's
is-
one of the biggest complaints we get in the city is my neighbor's tearing off a blank. My neighbor tore off their porch and they didn't put it back. My neighbor took all the windows out of their house and they made them this big instead of this big. I mean, a lot of the complaints we take in are
Yeah.
based on my neighbor's doing something that aesthetically is not,
And what can you do about those complaints?
well, that's what this ordinance is made to
Nothing.
do.
You
Right
can do
now.
nothing at this
Right,
point.
right now, there's nothing. I
Yeah.
mean, you could return Brazee's back to its original aluminum clad storefront
That
thing.
was
Cheese
the-
grater, the cheese grater.
That's in the 50s, so it's.
Yeah, it is historic.
Yeah, that's
And the
historic.
store started back in the 1880s, so it's not original.
So, we can still entertain this motion and deal with these other issues
Yeah.
as we go along. What you're saying, Bill, about information getting out there. I've already had a couple people come to me and said, how come I didn't know about Jesse Ravage's study? It includes my house, that kind of stuff.
Includes every house.
Yeah, right.
Even if it's like a question and answer kind of
Yeah.
format on the website, it would behoove us to get some of that.
I think it would also be really useful to somehow pull together a really easy to understand piece of this ordinance. I mean, taking the things that are in this ordinance, it's actually really well written. I was impressed with how logically it's written and how easy it is to understand. But for the average person tooling through 25 pages.
There is a template on the SHPO site, so that helps, right?
There you go. But maybe, you know, the most important things that an owner would want to know. How does this affect me? What are the benefits?
So just a quick, before this ordinance was adopted, I drafted a zoning ordinance that covers just downtown. So if you go to the city's or if you go to the online city code, I'll just send the link. This is gonna be way too much to explain.
Okay.
But I made in our zoning ordinance a tear sheet that says, it's got the section of, the secretary's standards, and then it'll say like, what can you do? What can you not do? What might be okay? What's not, for each section. So like, there's a section on porches, there's a section on windows, there's a section on, that's broken down to just be like hypotheticals, like,
Yeah,
I wanna
that's
do
great.
this, but,
Right.
so that's in our zoning
That's
ordinance right
great.
now, and I'll send everyone the link to that.
Okay.
That would be good.
I think that's great, but I do think that Bill has a good point. Like, I would be all for like a frequently asked questions, like we put ourselves in the shoes of
Yeah.
a property owner and so what happens if I want to change my porch? Like, what does this mean for me? And we just make it in like really accessible language and put that like on that website. And we can link to that, but I think that what you're describing might be too much information right off the bat. Like getting just like the basics down, I think is a really good idea.
Can I ask that we have discussion right on this issue, and then we move on to the actions that come afterwards? Does that make sense? So,
Might have to go back and tell us what the issue is.
Yeah.
what the motion is? Gary, can you reread it, please?
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
So good discussion.
Bob's watching me twitch over here.
I feel like
All right, that the commission approves the actions necessary to fulfill the designation in chapter 160 sub 11 of the CLG program of the city of Oneonta to recognize existing national historic districts and properties at the local historic district and property level.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. And was Dave Mears gonna look at this, or does he have to? No. Good.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make that face. No, you're-
Okay, so what actions should we take, or how do you want to proceed? Moving forward.
I mean, so what you kind of discussed is education part, which was like your next, so I guess my question would be, do you guys wanna provide us with stuff to populate the page with, or do you want us to take the lead, or how would you like to see that done? Cause like, that's the next thing, you've identified like what you wanna do, but how do you wanna do it? Should, I
Well,
mean,
I don't think it should be antiseptic. Most government is antiseptic. I think we should be selling it. It has to be on a marketing level, not on a, this is what we can do. This is what we can do. As a movement, we can make our town rise up and be better than, I don't know, let's not pick another town.
don't do that now.
Like, five
Only
just
on
came to
Delaware.
mind.
I have a list.
I list. Look at
Um,
Delhi
how
versus
was-
Walton.
How about, are you in a position to move this? do
Yeah,
this?
so I mean, I guess like what I'm asking is, do you wanna provide us with stuff that you want us to work to populate this with? or
Well,
do
I'm
you-
wondering if a couple of members of the commission would like to liaise with you to come up with the next steps to be either presented at the next meeting or however you wanna do it. Does that
I mean,
make
we
sense?
could also, couldn't we also just do a joint Google Drive thing that's just for us and
Yeah,
all of
we could do
us? That we can dump stuff on as we find it. I'm happy to spend some time researching, you know, the
Well,
benefits of local landmark
Yeah.
districts.
Is there something on the SHPO website, like as far as frequently asked questions stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
a template and
Right,
stuff that's already been questioned and answered.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, even other municipalities have pretty thorough,
yeah, this is not,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Unbending the wheel.
right.
yeah.
But
My
I think-
question, though, is
I think
if
Jerry's
we're-
point is well taken, though, we need to do it so it's positive
Yeah.
for
Yes.
the landowner.
So my only thing is, if we're gonna have a public hearing,
So if your next meeting tentatively would be scheduled for July 10th at 7 o'clock. Using that time frame, you would need to have anything that you want linked from that card, so whatever website you want them to go to, would need to be published by June 22nd, because that's when it's going to appear in the Daily Star.
Well, wait, we're saying the next meeting will be a public hearing?
If you were to use your next
if we
meeting
were to.
date as the public hearing. So the
Or you
next
could
step
have-
in the process, right, or you can push the public hearing off until August.
I
And
propose doing it until September, when we actually have people here and not people on vacation. And the schools are all in play and people are back to their routine. The summer is not a routine time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Lord knows how many of us will be here on the 10th or in August. I know we're
But-
going away in August.
By the way, is the second Monday seems to be working for the existing commission, so we'll stick with that, and we still have a July meeting, but you're suggesting we put it off until September.
Well, September for public forum.
Yeah,
We
because I
need-
think we need to make sure we get it right. and
Yeah,
not-
we have to
not-
get our discussion.
There's no giant rush here. I mean, unless somebody's about to destroy something.
Yeah. I mean, I do have an aside question as to the ordinance, when it comes to, we're talking about paint colors and this or that, or a porch, okay? And I think this is going in line with my understanding of the federal level. If a person doesn't wanna comply with the exact, stipulations for preservation, what, are there parameters, or is that it? Is it
You're-
cemented?
your board is ultimately the one that has to make determinations about that. At the end of the day, anything you do is going to set a precedent. So if you say, well, this guy, I mean, we know him, he's a good guy, you know, let's,
Cut him some slack?
cut him some slack. So what you're being tasked with doing is making determinations about what will be the impact of. And if you look at a lot of the ordinance, it's saying stuff like in-kind replacement, in-kind repair, like materials, like it's specifically looking to maintain what makes that structure historically valuable.
Right, and the appearance is similar. So you can't have the 8-inch aluminum siding, but you can get the original 6-inch clapboard, but it could be of a different material because today's.
So for example, like hardy plank
Yeah.
has been used as a great alternative to wood siding.
Right.
So hardy plank has kind of been broadly accepted as an in-kind replacement that has a similar aesthetic or architectural to wood, especially in like our climate zone.
Yeah.
There's even, so like, for example, National Park Service, they have an entire detail on vinyl siding in historic preservation. I mean,
Yeah, their pamphlets are amazing.
yeah, so like the whole thing about vinyl siding, I mean, I would not call that in-kind replacement. I would not call that, but you could wander down that rabbit hole if you wanted to, because National Park Service has a detail on it. I mean, they have a thing where they're like, it's not our preferred method, it's not what we're, but honestly, at the end of the day, you guys are gonna be the ones reviewing, you'll have to reference the ordinance, you'll have to set, this is what our standard of, and you'll have to stick to it, which is the
Yes,
tricky
That's
part.
the really part, that's important.
So
It does happen,
it's
it
gonna be
does
some
happen.
others Before we really jump into, so we have the answers for people
Yeah,
and keeping it
I
positive.
mean, we're gonna be learning as we go too,
Yeah.
but it's really important to be consistent, because you don't wanna
That's the
give one
easiest thing to
answer to
defend.
one neighbor, and then another one comes in next month and said, well, you told Johnny he could do this, and I, you know.
Exactly, so we have our parameters set, we have, this way, I mean, if we look confused, that's negative.
Yeah.
So, when we have this public forum, we have to be in lockstep, and we have to promote it positively. And we have to make the people who are impacted by this feel as though they're important,
I mean,
not,
they're getting a benefit here, 'cause they're
Exactly.
lucky to be in this group.
exactly,
Right.
And then they
exactly.
also have ownership over, like, the fate of their own property and project. 'Cause that is
Exactly.
part of, like, bringing people into the fold.
Right,
Yeah. So I like this idea that Dara had of creating a repository, because like just off the top of my head, I thought about like 4 different websites that have this information on it. So like I think that's a great idea. Like that's a great place to start. And
Is everybody okay with getting onto Google Drive, or is there another place they'd be happier with?
I'm fine with paper.
Okay.
It's just a, you have
I'm
to,
not good on mine. Not at all. My wife's worse and she still guides me,
okay.
so, I mean, searches and stuff.
It's just that it's an easy place that you can make it shared for everybody by your email, and people can just dump stuff in there, and it's all in one place. I mean, the other way to do it would be,
I mean, could we have one Google Drive doc and then that person can just distribute whatever's uploaded, or? I
Would
guess-
we use All for Oneonta for this?
Oh, that's a,
No, you're not an ad hoc committee.
oh yeah,
We're
that's right.
keeping you on the official page.
The first time I
We're
heard
not
something
that
like that.
important.
We started in that document.
isn't ad hoc less important than official?
I don't
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're all important.
I know, ad hoc generally means, you know, it's just sort of happening.
I'm not comfortable with it, I use it.
well, I mean, like we could like I think out of all the like sharing stuff I've used, like Google like Drive is the easiest. Dropbox tends to be clunky.
Clunky
And there's other like free software, but they're all like, it's weird. So maybe the idea of whoever wants to contribute to the shared Google Drive can, and those who don't want to can send this.
Yeah, it's like, yeah,
You
like
could email
Sarah,
it to
you and I
me.
could be the,
Yeah,
send it to me, and I'll take care of getting it onto the drive for you.
and then
Yeah.
we can share
Yeah.
it. We can send
Right.
you an email or something.
That it's
And then
on
how
there.
do we see it?
Well, you kind of have to be willing to go look at Google Drive, or we can just send it around by email, that's
Is
the
it
other
on
way
our
to do it.
website?
No, it's an app. Here, I can show you.
Jerry, do you have an email address?
Yeah.
I have a Gmail.
Okay, so,
So we can show you how to use it
Yeah.
sometime, Jerry. We'll just come down and get pizza and show you.
yeah. We'll come down next Monday.
Are you watching Jeopardy then?
Share that.
It's,
with
so
people,
it's,
so.
I think you'd actually
So if
like
you
it,
have
like it's
Google
way easier than it
email,
sounds.
do you have
Well, it's not a matter of that, it's a matter, I don't really do much
Oh, like
under your computer?
online like that, like,
So-
for example, this morning my computer went down, and I had to take care of stuff.
Yes, mine's
I
using
did it all by
Face.
phone.
Well, so even stuff like
Which
if you
was-
wanted to like text resources to like Cause I would be happy to work with you that on that, Dara, like,
Sure.
to just do that, so you could text it to one of us and be like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
you should add this to the resource list.
Yeah, and then if we can just send it around by email to everybody,
Yeah.
if that would be,
And is this
you know.
just for ideas or for?
Yeah, I think it's just
Anything.
You
You
know,
can't
I
have
think
any
we're gonna need-
discussion or make any, and no, everybody knows this, but I remiss if I didn't say it.
Yeah.
You cannot make any decisions electronically.
right,
They all have to be done at a public meeting, but
Got it.
here is the information, perfectly okay.
So we're gonna start out just sharing ideas on the Google Doc, and then it's gonna
and especially, let's
eventually
limit it
morph
right
into
now to
a document.
stuff that will make it easier for all of us, one, to be on the same page when we're presenting to the public. And two, great ideas for how to present it to the public, and what are good, simple, happy, flappy ideas about it,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
Steve said he had a few,
Yeah, I'm gonna send you a copy of the zoning ordinance
So you
that we
could send
currently
those
have.
Yeah,
That will
which sounds
probably have
great.
to go away, because unfortunately, you can't have two boards doing the same type of review. So what I did was, before this commission existed, I like Trojan horsed this commission in under the planning commission. But now that you guys exist, I have to, but you'll at least see what we kinda have, and,
Yeah,
and
that'd
you
be
can see all the resources I gave to the planning commission. So, yeah.
So,
I mean, I think
There-
it's pretty simple. It's just the exterior of the house. It's
Yep.
not like, you know, we're not getting into the inside. We'll have to make some decisions about how visible certain houses that are on corners and front on two streets, or, you know, back right, and a lot of houses in Oneonta back right up to each other, and there might be some discussion about that.
Will this also cover outbuildings?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be structures that are visible from the right of way.
On a property, so like,
Yep.
okay, so that's also something that we.
So
so
you get
if
into, like,
somebody
your-
wants to put a shed on their property and it's seen,
You would
we would
talk
have
about
to.
it. Any
If it's in a
exterior
district.
Why?
Otherwise, the planning commission gets it.
Yep,
And
otherwise
the other
planning
big one that
commission
always
says-
comes up, and we had problems with, is demolition by neglect. We had a couple
Yes.
of giant 9-bedroom gorgeous things that were just completely melting away because the owners weren't doing what they needed
We've
to
had
do.
that in Oneonta,
Yeah.
too.
How many houses
Couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah. And this ordinance has got stuff in it about that,
Yep.
so that's good.
And that's the other thing, the absentee landlords, that may fall into this district, or
Well-
a specific district.
Yeah, so I mean, like, that's kind of where this is getting to is, there are properties like theoretically on Walnut Street that like, currently you could knock every piece of trim off, tear the siding off and throw aluminum siding on it, call it a day.
Yeah.
Or whatever, I mean, you could just, there's nothing to stop it.
But
So-
how does that relate to absentee landlords?
So, because we have so many landlords, we don't require, I mean, we're not requiring in-kind replacement or repairs. So it's cheap and easy to tear off architectural detailing. It's
Right.
expensive to put it on or maintain
Or
it.
maintain it, yeah.
I
Does that relate to student rentals and stuff like that?
It's any, I mean, not, I shouldn't say that. We have very good landlords in Oneonta. We have some not so hot landlords in Oneonta, and we have some in between. The guys that are not so hot are not interested in maintaining architectural features on rental buildings. They're like, if I can just tear it off, I'll tear it off. If I can. So the idea with this ordinance is that you're gonna prevent wholesale, just, I'm tearing off everything just to make it cheap to maintain.
And then there's the landlords, though, that have to deal with the kids that destroy
Right.
their
The
houses.
porch, yes.
The porch, details,
Right.
where does that fall into?
Yeah. What happens if we get significant pushback about, by an owner in a district that does not want to be?
That would be up to the council. I mean, the council ultimately is the one that's voting to
So they
make
can
that.
express at the public hearing they're dismay at being included in
Yep.
the, and then the council could hear them yay or nay, or?
Yeah, I mean, the council ultimately has the ability to say, no, we're gonna go ahead and go against this, but I mean, the owner not wanting to be included in a district is not necessarily a reason to not include the property. Like, that's not, there's no requirement that the owner be cooperative or,
Excuse me, generally, if we make decision, would it only go to the council if they ask for it to come, or every decision they have to okay?
So they would be the approving body for designation of districts.
Oh, okay.
Once it gets
But not
into
for-
individual determinations, that's all that doesn't go to the council. The council, there's two models for these ordinances, and one model, you guys just are the be-all, end-all. You designate, there is no council involvement at all. The other model is, you guys make recommendations on districts, and the council ultimately approves as the legislative body. The city of Oneonta opted for the council being able to be the decider as far as like where the districts are gonna be. So you guys prepare all the work, you do all the footwork, you do the public hearing. The council can theoretically deny or modify that district because they were like, we ultimately wanna have the control over how this ordinance is applied.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but so then part of our, like, when we present this to council, is like advocating for why we are making this.
Right.
To like eventually like to counterbalance any negativity about it, to really like advocate for this as a really good thing and educate the council members about why it is a great idea.
Yeah, so this isn't zoning, but it kind of operates in the same way. You always are looking to do it in a way that's not arbitrary. So like, you're going to the council and saying, for example, with this one, these are already nationally registered districts. The federal government, National Park Service has said, this district, as it's delineated, is of national importance. We believe, based on that all the structures within it would therefore also have local significance. That is not arbitrary. That is a sound. So if the council said, well, we think that the structures on this side of the street shouldn't be included in a local district, you could then argue, well, that is arbitrary because this has already been designated, here's the survey work, so the idea is that we never want to make arbitrary decisions. Just like in zoning, we never want to make arbitrary decisions because those kind of decisions are then challenged in court. So you're looking to make the most rational, logical argument for why you're doing what you're doing.
And who defines arbitrary in this case?
Guys in robes. So ultimately,
Guys
like,
and gals in robes, come on.
yeah, sorry, persons in robes. So you can do kind of whatever you want, but ultimately you don't want to be arbitrary because you don't want to be challenged and lose.
Sure.
So, and you just don't want, and in practice, you just don't want to be arbitrary. Like, the purpose of this is to be rational, logical, progressively minded, and making this make sense.
Shall we just briefly see what our action items are, or does everybody know what we're doing?
And we're meeting next 10th, you said?
Would be July 10th. Did we decide that we wanted to do a September meeting for the
Yeah,
public
yeah.
hearing?
Yeah, we want a motion on that, or we need a motion, or just?
And you're good to just let me know that that's what you want the date set.
That would be September 11th.
It'd be September 11th, so any materials would need to be posted and available by August 24th.
And that certainly seems doable, right?
Yeah. We really wanna do that.
Well, should we have a motion in a second then on that?
If you want, you certainly can.
Bill, Jerry?
A motion for September? Okay, let's motion for September.
For public hearing on September 11th, okay.
I know it's an awful day.
It's,
It is September 11th.
yeah, it's 9/11.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that, are you
It's
backing
just kind of a
off?
really cruddy day because
Yeah.
it's what everybody associates with blowing up the World Trade Center.
Yeah, so.
We don't want to be connected with that.
Yeah.
Do we, well, we don't, do we need to set it on a meeting date? I don't think we do. And we don't have to have a quorum for it, I don't think, do we?
Can we do it a week after, the third week, just for that one?
Stephen and I both have a standing meeting the third Monday of every month.
Which,
Excuse me, the question about, does it need to be part of a commission meeting?
No.
Okay.
But scheduling this room is difficult, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
That's
I'm
what
not
you're
sure
doing
if
now.
I'll be able to.
September fourth is probably,
September fourth,
Labor
Labor
Day.
Day.
Yeah,
That's Labor Day.
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
So maybe what we should do is just look around and then
So
kind of,
we can do.
okay, we got plenty of time to.
Yeah, why don't we
Excuse
work-
me, Carrie, what did you say?
That's okay. I have the September calendar up if people wanna chat a little bit. Just throw out a couple dates for people to consider. Thursday, September 7th. I can do anything after 6 o'clock.
That sounds like a good day. Thursday, that's sort of, it's not the weekend yet.
Right.
Is it too close to Labor Day?
Yeah, they're just coming back from Labor Day.
I don't know. I don't go away for Labor Day, I don't know.
What happens after September 11th, which is when we would ordinarily meet?
Your next available meeting time would be the 18th, but that is the third
Yeah.
Monday.
Yeah.
There's also nothing that says it have to meet at 7 o'clock. We can do Tuesday, that would be September 12th. I can do a 4 o'clock.
Does the public forum have to be in the council chamber?
It needs to be in an area that's accessible to the public, that has the capabilities for allowing public input, so
And probably camera and all of that,
we
right?
record everything.
Handicap
So
accessible.
kind of like a auditorium or something,
I mean, if you think you're gonna have that many people, we can certainly do that.
it's possible.
I mean, how big, I admit I'm a little naive when it comes to how large these districts are.
be every property in downtown Leonta, every property on Walnut Street.
Okay, so yeah, you're onto something, Bill.
So
Um,
I think, I'm opposed to doing it at 4. I think we should aim for 7 because I think that 4 o'clock leaves us open to ostracizing anybody who works,
Right.
anybody with children,
And I can't be here other
on
than
a non-Monday, yeah, that's true.
So I mean, why don't we
So
just
you'd
plan
be
for the
September
third?
25th. That's a Monday.
It doesn't, if we go that far out, what does it mean for things happening in the next 3 or 4 months? You know,
Yeah, that's true.
Is there anything on the docket for Walnut Street being torn up?
I mean, it could be tomorrow, I don't know. I
Well, the
mean,
problem
that's
is now that this recommendation has been made, it stops all activity.
true,
So,
for 90 days.
right,
You mean the
so what's
motion that
next?
we are doing
the
this?
motion that you've passed indicating that you plan to identify these areas as local districts stops the ability for people to submit permits, stops,
Yeah,
so
but that's 90 days, so
that's 90 days.
from today. So that's June, July,
Isn't that
August,
late August?
September 12th.
So if you
Yeah.
did in August, if you connected it, not that you have to, if you connected it to your August meeting, which would be the 14th, we would need to have everything by July 28th, which is still just over a month and a half.
And what are we compiling, the letter?
Whatever
No, all the
information you want.
information
All the
that-
information that we wanna.
Present,
To the
you know,
public.
like, it's a lot to
So-
absorb.
What if we were to have our meetings and then in August say, we're not quite ready yet, let's push this, can we push it? I guess they call it tabling in the council, but, I mean, stall. And then we can get
Extend the
it
90 days?
and then extend it to the 25th. Ask for an extension, so to speak.
Why don't we just set the date as September 25th? I mean, it's only 2 weeks past the 11th.
You never know with these guys, so.
Yeah.
I've seen some crazy stuff.
Well, in the summers when they might be doing a lot of work.
Well, it holds back there
Right,
in the summertime.
that's true, right.
It is just 1 month, I could probably just skip my meeting, if we wanted to do the 18th.
That
You
makes
can
it,
skip the meeting too?
Yeah.
So we make it the 18th?
Let's make the 18th.
Because that's
For a
when we
public
got the
hearing.
90-day mark.
That's pretty close.
Yeah,
It's a little past it, but, I mean, if we're taking today, is today the 90 days kicks in? Is that right, Carrie?
Yeah, today is when the meeting starts.
Was there anything in there about them taking action within 62 days?
I believe that's after the
After the
close of
public
the public
hearing?
hearing.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's not until that happens.
Okay,
and so
good.
Carrie, if we're doing it on the 18th of September, so when do you need everything by?
So I would need by August 31st.
Okay,
That gives us a lot of time.
that one.
that gives us 2 meetings to get our
Yeah,
act
And
together.
in between that, we can all be working,
yeah,
you know,
compiling resources isn't making decisions.
August
No.
31st.
no.
Working.
And we'll need to figure out if we will need to seek an alternate space, because I'm torn with the experience of knowing people don't come to public hearings, but the knowledge that we can have a lot of people.
And this can be a polarizing topic.
Yeah,
Back to people.
I hope
Yeah,
it's in a positive
absolutely,
way.
but
It could be a,
There's something that
yes.
have to try.
They'll just do it bigger.
Yeah, it's all government interference. They're gonna tell me what I can grow in my garden. That's what this crazy man told me the other day.
I can't
Whatever
do
that was.
anything because the school is even.
Is there, okay, should we move on? Is there other new business? Is there other business of any kind?
So the question is, September 11th is still gonna be our meeting, and then the 18th is, or are we doing the 18th as our meeting?
I think the idea was you were gonna do the 18th as the meeting of the public.
And,
Unless we feel like we need, should we kind of have it open to possibly having a landmarks commission meeting on that day in case we need it?
Well, we have one
It's not a bad
in
idea.
And then we have one in August.
Especially if somebody, what if somebody gets hit with the 90-day and they wanna present?
Yeah, let's try to keep that date
Okay.
free.
Okay.
And we'll see as we get closer whether we need to.
And for clarification, if someone wanted to pull a permit in that period, if they just willingly comply with the ordinance, they can.
Sure, that
So-
makes perfect sense.
So the way the ordinance is worded, this 90-day kind of moratorium only impacts people who are like, I'm not willing to just go through the process. So if theoretically someone was like, I wanna do blank thing, they could put in an application and they could just willingly comply, and then they could move forward with their project.
would we be reviewing
Yep.
that?
Yep. The idea is, we don't wanna like burden someone and prevent them from working if they're willing to just comply with the ordinance
Yeah, we
willingly.
don't wanna have anything, we wanna keep it positive.
Yeah,
And August 14th will be the next meeting after July 10th.
Yep, we have July 10th, August 14th, tentatively the 11th, right?
those are your public hearings.
Yeah.
And then the 18th is a public meeting.
I really would like to see us try to have hour and a half meetings or so, if we can do that. But I did want to bring up one other thing, and maybe you have others too. Whether we should, think about what we think the optimum size of this commission should be, and whether we should, relay that information to the mayor.
So along those lines, what happened to Shirley?
Lacey?
Yeah,
Well, I wasn't at the meeting, but by the minutes, her nomination was tabled, because she wasn't a realtor.
oh, and we need a realtor on the committee?
No. Well, I'm looking at what what the requirements are, the credentials are, and it doesn't say anything about realtor in the New York State certified local government program, about that they needing to be a realtor.
So the idea is that they wanna have someone who represents, basically like, has a knowledge of like property, like transactions. But the idea is that the mayor ultimately appoints these, so the mayor can ultimately decide that we've reached out to 8 realtors, none of them got back to us, none of them were interested, and then he fills it with whoever he wants.
This is CMG.
Yeah,
Okay.
so at the end of the day, that's where we're being held up right now, with that one person. So ideally, like, I mean, you either find someone or he just appoints and says, look, I couldn't find a realtor that was interested in being on the board and have the specific experience that the board needed.
So the council doesn't need to approve? Is that what you're saying?
They have to approve whoever's nominated.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it specifically says in the ordinance, if you can't find someone that meets that criteria, the mayor ultimately can nominate and then they approve. It's like any other board, I mean, that's just kind of how it works. The idea though is the board isn't dominated by like, you don't want a board that's all architects or all builders or all historians or all, you know, the idea is you kind of mix it up.
All pizza makers.
All right.
We're dwindling. There used to be one every corner.
Yeah.
So Seth,
We don't have any tattoo artists on our commission.
Oh, boy, that would be good.
So are we looking for someone, or is someone still in limbo?
Someone's been tabled in limbo.
Okay.
It was, at the meeting, they directed the mayor to reach out to additional realtors to see if any of them wanted to be on the board, for the
I think
commission.
The question that Bob had is, couldn't theoretically we add both a realtor and Sharon Lacy? Like, we're not capped in size, like, how big do we want it to become?
We
our
want
cap?
Yeah.
eight,
Unfortunately.
You're capped
We
at
are
7.
You're capped at 7.
At 7,
By
okay.
Oh, we are.
By
Yeah.
code, you're capped at,
So,
yeah.
so typically what you have is either a 5 or a 7. You have a 5-man board or a 7-man board, 7-person.
And you're at 6 right now.
Yeah.
We're at 6 right now.
Yeah, I guess we're heading for 7.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you always want an odd number, so we can,
Yeah, you always,
3 to 5.
That's
Right.
exactly.
We had 3.
Last week,
It's true, but we weren't allowed to conduct any
I
business.
know, at the not meeting.
yeah.
Okay. Is there any other business? Hearing none, could I hear a motion to adjourn?
I second that motion.
All right.